In a dusty corner of a small town lived Daniel, a humble man with calloused hands and a gentle heart. He worked as a carpenter, creating beauty from broken wood, though the world rarely paid him what his work was worth. His life had always been simple, quiet, until he met Eliza. It was late spring when their worlds first collided. Daniel had just finished a long day in his modest workshop on the edge of town, his hands dusty with sawdust and his shirt clinging to his back from the heat. He was loading planks onto his old pickup when he heard the sputtering sound of an engine dying nearby. At the bend in the road just outside his shop, a sleek black car had rolled to a stop, steam rising from under its hood. Curious and concerned, Daniel walked over. The woman behind the wheel stepped out, frustrated and tapping rapidly on her phone. Her heels clicked against the gravel. She wore a pale blue dress that didn't belong anywhere near sawdust or grease. "Trouble?" Daniel asked, keeping his voice calm. The woman turned, startled. She was stunning, elegant, poised, but clearly out of her element. "Yes, the engine just stopped," she said, her voice clipped but polite. "I've tried calling for help, but there's no signal." Daniel nodded and gently approached the car. "Mind if I take a look?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. Daniel opened the hood, quickly assessing the damage. A broken fan belt, nothing too serious if you had tools and knew what you were doing. "I can fix it," he said. "I have a belt that might fit and a few tools. It'll take a little while." Eliza looked him over, uncertain. But there was something about him. Steady eyes, rough hands, no sign of arrogance or deceit. "All right," she said. "Thank you." While he worked, she sat on a nearby bench outside his shop. At first, they spoke in brief, guarded exchanges, her asking how long it would take, him explaining what he was doing. But as time passed, the conversation deepened. She asked about the carvings inside his workshop, surprised to learn he'd made them all by hand. He asked about her, and she admitted she was visiting from the city for a charity gala in a nearby town. "Charity?" he smiled. "Helping people like me?" She smiled back. "People like you could teach the charity crowd more than we could ever give." That moment, unexpected, quiet, was the first spark. By the time Daniel had the car running again, the sun had begun to dip. She offered him money. He refused. She insisted. He shook his head. "Maybe. Just your name instead," he said, almost bashfully. She laughed softly. "Eliza? Eliza Moreau, Daniel Cole." He didn't expect to see her again. But a week later, she returned. Not with car trouble this time, just coffee and a curious look in her eyes. She asked if she could see more of his work. He showed her. And slowly, over a dozen unexpected visits, conversations turned into stories. Glances became touches, and two lives, so different, began to find common ground. No one understood it. Her parents were horrified. His neighbors were skeptical. But Eliza didn't care. Daniel didn't question it. Love, after all, rarely makes sense. They married quietly in a small chapel outside town, beneath trees Daniel had carved initials into as a child. And for a time, it was perfect. After the wedding, simple, quiet, without the presence of Eliza's family, Daniel carried her across the threshold of their small wooden house like it was a palace. The place was modest. 2 bedrooms, worn floorboards, and furniture Daniel had built himself. It smelled of cedar and old books. To Eliza, used to crystal chandeliers and imported linens, it was a world apart. But at first, it felt like an adventure, like she was stepping into a storybook. Daniel would rise before dawn to work in his shop, the rhythmic tapping of his hammer becoming the heartbeat of the house. Eliza, who had never cooked a meal in her life, began learning to make breakfast, burning eggs at first, laughing at her own mistakes. They lived on homegrown vegetables, cheap cuts of meat, and whatever Daniel could earn from custom furniture orders. He made her a rocking chair for the porch, carved with vines and roses. She painted the shutters a cheerful green. In the evenings, they'd sit outside drinking tea, feet touching, watching the sun melt into the hills. They talked about dreams, traveling, maybe opening a gallery for Daniel's work, starting a family. It was hard, but love made it beautiful. But as time passed, the charm of simplicity began to wear thin for Eliza. There were no dinner parties, no silk gowns, no late-night champagne on penthouse balconies. The only visitors were Daniel's friends, kind, salt-of-the-earth people she couldn't always relate to. She tried to stay cheerful, but her laughter came less often. The silence between them grew heavier. Money was always tight. Daniel took on extra jobs, repairing roofs, sanding floors, building sheds. He came home exhausted, covered in sweat and splinters. Eliza began spending more time alone. She missed her old life, the convenience, the elegance, the ease. She didn't say it aloud at first, but Daniel could feel it in her sighs, in the way her gaze lingered on the life she'd left behind. When she discovered she was pregnant, Daniel was overjoyed. He built a cradle by hand, carving stars into the sides. Eliza tried to share in his excitement, but the anxiety clawed at her. Twins. Twice the cost, twice the work. She imagined her future buried in diapers, laundry, and unpaid bills. There would be no returning to the city, not with children on her hip and dust in her lungs. After the birth, Daniel threw himself into fatherhood. He took care of the babies at night so Eliza could sleep, rocked them when they cried, and sang lullabies with a cracked, tender voice. But Eliza drifted further away. Her eyes became distant. She began to visit town more often, staying longer each time. Daniel never asked questions. He was afraid of the answers. The warmth in their home cooled. Arguments grew sharper. Love didn't vanish in a single moment. It faded slowly, like the scent of flowers left in the sun too long. Until one day, she was gone. Daniel stood in the quiet house holding 2 babies in his arms, the smell of her perfume still lingering faintly on her pillow. The cradle he built sat in the corner, empty of everything but memory. The morning after Eliza left, Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, a baby in each arm. Lily in pink, Jonah in blue, both crying, both unaware their mother was gone for good. He didn't cry, not yet. He couldn't. There wasn't time for heartbreak when there were mouths to feed and diapers to change. At first, every day was a blur. Sleep became a stranger. He burned meals, spilled bottles, and sometimes cried quietly over the kitchen sink while the twins napped in the next room. He fumbled through parenting books he borrowed from the local library. His hands, once skilled with chisels and wood, grew clumsy with bottles and blankets. But he never gave up, because they needed him, and because he loved them with a kind of love that left no room for self-pity. The town watched in